How big of an intelligence failure was this?
Well, you have to think of it more as a logistical failure as opposed to an intelligence failure. This was a breakdown in what should be very standard security protocols. And look, the Secret Service does that very well, but clearly, right? And you always have to. I'd caveat this with one thing: you have to always wait for an investigation to finish. Right? They're currently in the middle of their own investigation as to what the hell happened, and obviously, as soon as this happens, everybody on social media is an executive protection expert, right? So everybody's talking about, exactly how this happened. Well, you know what? So I think it's important not to get out over your skis. But in a situation like this, clearly, it would be insane to say that there weren't failures, there weren't breakdowns here, and even people with no experience can look at this and say, "I'm sorry." How did you not have somebody up on top of a roof that had line of sight to the stage, to the rally event? And so typically, look, when something like this happens, and I've done countless, advanced plannings and security assessments and risk and threat assessments. And typically when something happens like this, it's not one thing, right? It's a series of mistakes or missteps that compound, and then you end up with this goat rope that never should have happened. So they're doing an investigation. Congress, of course, has called for an investigation. I wouldn't expect anything to come from that, because Washington, D.C. is where all investigations go to die. And but the Bureau is involved. Secret Service obviously doing their own hot wash, and they sit underneath the Department of Homeland Security. So if DHS does a review, fine. But there's so much video footage of this, right? And it happened in real time with so many people watching and so many different angles that I think in this case, unlike sometimes you get investigations of an event and you don't get much transparency, right? Because internally they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we improve this? Well, you don't want to necessarily talk about all that activities because you're informing people who might have nefarious intent. But here, it was clear for everyone to see that there was a significant number of issues and problems.
Whose responsibility, who does the buck ultimately stop with when we're talking about this? Homeland Security, Secret Service, local law enforcement?
Well, I think what you're going to find likely is, first of all, in terms of who has primacy on the ground, it's a Secret Service, right? So they established a security perimeter. And then, according to at least early reports and what Secret Service is saying, is then they designated local law enforcement as having control outside that designated security zone, which included the building where the shooter took up position. But that's, ultimately it's the Secret Service's responsibility. So they should have obviously said, okay, so what are you doing in relation to those buildings that have line of sight? And if local law enforcement had said, well, we've got a couple of unarmed officers that are patrolling the ground and, interacting with the attendees down on the ground, then you'd say, okay, well, how about you give me a state trooper or one of your local officers up on that rooftop and that one over there, any building, right? That's got line of sight. And you post somebody up there, just cover it down. That's Secret Service's ultimate responsibility, even if, theoretically, okay, on paper, this area over here is under the control of local authorities. So there's a procedural problem. There's a command and control problem. There's a communications problem during the course of this rally. I think you'll also find there was some command and control issues in terms of the ability for the sniper or the counter sniper team on site, and they had a couple of them up there, to act, right? And there was probably, I don't know this, I'm speculating, right? But I'm speculating based on experience from past events that, there may have been a lag time in getting the go, no-go figured out in terms of taking a shot on the target. There may have been problems at the top of Secret Service in terms of what did they allow for as a security package for former President Trump.
When you say that, you mean the number and quality of the people that were on the ground?
Yeah, you've kind of got a standard, former president security package, because they get coverage for life after they finish their time. And you could easily argue that perhaps the package for Trump, given that he's now the presumptive nominee for the November election, that clearly he draws a lot of heat from a lot of people.
Should have been beefed up.
Should have been beefed up. And look, it was under the Trump administration when, we tagged Soleimani. And the Iranians and their various proxies are still very upset about that. And we know that they've been looking at various opportunities to try to target individuals they feel responsible. So there were a variety of reasons why you could look and go, yeah, the package for former President Trump needs to be more robust than, say, what we would normally allocate. And so that may be, I don't know, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that may be an issue where now you've got more of a procedural problem with management, right? And then you've got the whole other issue of just general discourse. If you demonize somebody on either side and call them Hitler, fascist, intent on destroying democracy, a threat to the nation, as President Biden's referred to him even the day before the shooting, you're probably, inciting some irrational person who, may not be able to process all that as hyperbole, right? Yeah, and they're going to take it literally.
This is a point that Tulsi Gabbard made, where she said that how can you expect someone to not try and stop Hitler if you keep calling them Hitler? Would you not go back in time and try and kill Hitler? And if literally Hitler, there was a magazine that had him looking like a number of magazines that have had him basically in the same poster style that Adolf Hitler did in the past. How many more analogies do you need to draw? And it's one of these things where until the repercussions and the consequences of doing that become kinetic, everyone thinks that it's just a LARP. Well, Trump's bombastic. He's gregarious. He says crazy things. We need to push back with the same sort of technology that he uses, which is words and imagery. And then someone takes it up a notch.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's clear, and people always say, it's whataboutism, but it's clear it's a problem on both sides, right? On the edges of both sides, there's all this rhetoric and hyperbole. So there's no doubt about that. But you're right. Look, if the New Republican, that was one of the magazines that had the sort of this propaganda poster of Trump as Hitler, they're throwing these things out there. And I think rational people look at that and go, okay, well, man, that's over the top. It's rhetoric, it's hyperbole. I get it. You guys are using this as a campaign strategy, but there are a lot of people out there who aren't going to process it that way.